Well, the Chronicle, as you know, has been around almost 60 years, and it is a print first, has a sort of print first mentality. But what we really need to do is also meet the needs of the audience in a moment like that. Not just because, as you say, we're facing all this upheaval around political disruption, economic disruption on campuses, all kinds of challenges there. But there's also the challenges of how do you meet people in the media at a moment like this.
Voices of Innovation invites big thinkers with bold ideas to talk about the influence of technology in today's society. I'm your host, Lev Gonik, and we're recording today's episodes from the Agentic AI and the Student Experience Summit, a global gathering of over 600 education and industry leaders hosted by Arizona State University. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another episode of Voices of Innovation. It's my pleasure to introduce Brad Wolverton, colleague and friend, who's the editor-in-chief at the Chronicle of Higher Education, to a conversation about what it means to be in the seat as editor-in-chief in this disruptive moment. What you think, Brad, about the opportunities that you and your whole industry are being able to work towards, and where you see opportunities for partnership. So let's start from the beginning. Just briefly, as we were sharing a little bit earlier, this is a bit of a round trip for you. Give us in a thumbnail sketch, essentially, your experience starting from your round one at the Chronicle and bring us forward to today.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Lev. It's great to be here. I'm honored to be one of the people you talk to at this event. It's a pretty amazing event. So I started at the Chronicle in 2001 and worked there for about a dozen years, where I worked up the ranks. I became both a reporter and an editor. And then I left for the last 9 years. I went and sort of took a different path. I went to NerdWallet, where I became an investigative journalist on a team of Pulitzer Prize winners, thinking I'd learn all kinds of things from them. What I learned was NerdWallet, as a tech company, was really most interested in digital innovation. And I was really the person to spearhead that there. And then I left to join The Hustle, which was a business and tech newsletter, and fast-growing newsletter that kind of has like this really irreverent voice and has reached people in kind of unique ways. And then we sold The Hustle to Hubspot. So I got a chance to work for not one, not two, but 3 tech companies in the last 9 years. And I worked at HubSpot to take the team from 4 people, which is what we were when I started, which was mostly just writers, to a team of about 40 people, where we had a podcast network and a YouTube network and a newsletter network, where we reached about 50 million people a month.
Fantastic. So if I can sort of encapsulate this, you began round one with the Chronicle in the pre-digital era, or at least it wasn't pre-digital, but the Chronicle was definitely pre-digital back then. You ran through really at the leading edge of all of the digital journalism world, from investigative to being able to introduce to all kinds of new audiences, creating new audiences through digital. And obviously your return back to the Chronicle is not only a challenge to join the digital, but maybe this is where we go, talk about the challenge of meeting the moment where AI is now on top of, or maybe you want to think of it as undergirding a whole new era of digital journalism.
Well, the Chronicle, as you know, has been around almost 60 years, and it is a print first, has a sort of print first mentality. For many years, we used to publish on a weekly basis, and now we're a bi-weekly print publication, but we also need to speed up the sort of urgency with which we do our work. And so I saw this as a really unique opportunity to return to a place that had sort of had a lot of success in the past. We've won lots of awards. We've been sort of like mentioned at shows like this, at events like this, where people read in-depth, smart articles in the Chronicle that you really can't find anywhere else. But what we really need to do is also meet the needs of the audience in a moment like that. Not just because, as you say, we're facing all this upheaval around political disruption, economic disruption on campuses, all kinds of challenges there. But there's also the challenges of how do you meet people in the media at a moment like this. So there's almost like these combined forces of higher ed being disrupted, but the media industry being disrupted, that made me most excited to be back in this seat.
It's terrific. And it just strikes me that one of the things, as a longtime reader of the Chronicle, not quite to its origin days, but certainly over the last several decades, is that the Chronicle not only reported on the state of higher education, you also helped shape the conversation about the issues of the day. So as you think about the new role that you're taking on and with your vision for what the Chronicle must become, how do you imagine shaping the conversation in higher education at this moment where we're talking about AI and digital and this, not only the technical disruptions, but as you were just inferring, many disruptions that impact the socio-economic, technical, and actually our whole space?
Great question and a tough one to figure out. I'm only a few months in, so I have a lot of work to do still on this. But my early inclination is to think about the way people consume information and how that is changing. So whereas in the past we really focused on an audience that would get our newspaper in print and read it and pass it around the office, and people would mark it up and talk about it at conferences. Now, how do we become more part of the conversation when they can get information freely, really good information freely, and we compete against a bunch of outlets that are actually quite good and they don't charge anything. So their business model is different than ours. I think we have to think a lot about how do we form habits with our audience in new ways. Newsletters are one of the best ways to do that. With my experience in newsletters, I've been able to grow a lot of really solid newsletters. And a lot of that is just thinking about ways that people need to quickly get insights. You know, sometimes it's curated. Sometimes it's not just originally reported long form written things. You know, when I think about good newsletters and how they've evolved over time, look at, say, the New York Times' newsletter. When they first started this thing, it was essentially like putting print into a digital form. It didn't feel that much different to me. It sort of still had this voice of God feel. I think we have some of that same problem with our newsletters. We have about 12 newsletters. We need to have fewer. We need to have better, more effective, more modern newsletters. We also need to really think about the audience in terms of how they consume information. They don't just read. They don't read as long of stories. You know, we have to really reimagine the article format. One of the things we've just introduced this week is a live updates feature on our website. You know, we get a fair amount of our traffic through newsletter links, but we also get a lot of people to just show up at the site to see what we've published. When I was interviewing for this job, I was sort of amazed at how often when a big news story would break, the Chronicle wasn't showing up on the site. So I think the more you do that, you condition an audience away from coming to you as a source of news and insights. So our live updates feature, which we just introduced, gives us a chance to immediately weigh in the moment when big news breaks. Like this Monday was the compact where all the schools, the 9 schools that the administration asked for feedback from, had a chance to weigh in. And we sort of, I think we had 13 pieces in the matter of a few hours that were short that sometimes led to longer pieces. One thing you keep asking me about, though, I do want to say is how do we think about the emergence of AI in the space of education, higher education, but also in the space of media, which is two forces that we're working with. And I don't say working against, because I think what we're trying to think about is how do we become more AI first in how we think about business at the Chronicle across all of our different departments. I'm heading up our AI working group that's just recently actually wrote for the first time a set of policies on this. And I think what we're going to see is a lot more use of AI to make faster choices, to help the business move faster, but also to sort of analyze things in smarter ways so that we can get to like be able to produce content faster.
I wanted to ask you about, again, shaping the dialogues, shaping the conversation in our sector, and thinking that this kind of a conversation, you as the editor-in-chief and your outstanding editorial team can also obviously use this modality to curate and to help shape conversations. And while the print medium and obviously the written medium is a hugely important tradition to carry forward, so too, as we were discussing last night, an opportunity to leverage this kind of technology. But let me just sort of ask you, as you think about beyond policies to help shape your orientation to AI, what are some of the first experiments that we might see in the months ahead as the Chronicle begins to embrace the opportunity while setting, as you just said, the guardrails for the ways in which AI are going to be utilized in the medium and the banner known as the Chronicle of Higher Education?
That's a very good question. I think that's still something we're trying to figure out. Parts of our business will use it more than others. I think when I first read the ethics policy that we created around AI a couple of years ago, I was struck by how the newsroom was really averse to any use of AI in terms of we want to make sure that the pieces that we report and the information we put out in the world is created by humans. And I think there's a lot more that we can do to curate information to help us think about, gaps in our coverage, things that have worked well with our coverage in the past. How can we lean into that some more? How can we use sort of insights and analysis based on some of the numbers that we see to kind of lean into this? One thing that we are doing specifically is we had a technology reporter whose job was primarily to cover AI. Now we're really democratizing the coverage of AI throughout our newsroom. So every reporter will have a piece of this. So if you're covering enrollment issues in the business of enrollment, there's certainly something to be said for AI, and as well as there is across the academy coverage.
ASU, like a number of other great universities in the country, has outstanding schools of journalism where students are confronted with a passion for storytelling or for investigation and the like, and trying to also make sense of the world of AI. As you think about different ways, the business model evolving, the need to explore different ways of getting content that is relevant, do you see possibilities of working with university partners, whether it's with schools of journalism or with others who are content creating and leveraging AI to perhaps stitch together interesting series where your reporters don't have to be at the line pitching to you and the editorial team, going out, doing the investigating, doing the editing, and moving forward? Are there new kinds of models, innovative, disruptive models that you could imagine?
I mean, I've been part of a number of partnerships over the years at different news organizations. Specifically at the Chronicle, I was part of a reporting partnership with the Huffington Post's investigative team years ago, where we looked at the large increase in student fees across colleges. And I think there's a lot of ways to use AI to sort of help us think through ways to address some of those challenges that colleges still face. I've also been part of reporting partnerships, and I can see us doing more of those with colleges like the Cronkite School here at Arizona State, which is a fantastic journalism program. We've done partnerships with other schools like the Grady School at the University of Georgia and other places where we've leveraged students' interest, and not just the fact that maybe they're there on the ground, but maybe they can help, do freedom of information requests and do some of the work that would allow for us to kind of be more expansive in our coverage. Because even though we have, I believe, the largest newsroom focused on coverage of higher education of any news organization, we have a much depleted newsroom from what I remember years ago. And I think we have to pick our spots more carefully. And I think we can use AI as an accelerator in some of our coverage.
A great way to end, Brad Wolverton. Good luck to you, and thanks so much for joining us here at ASU over these couple of days on our Agentic AI and the student experience. We hope you've enjoyed and are learning along with all of us, and we look forward to many more opportunities to talk with you, and we're looking forward to actually having you on stage just a little bit later as you actually curate a conversation with some of our participants. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks so much, Lev.